You jump into a cold pool. Your face hits the water first. And for half a second, before you even start swimming, your heart slows down. You didn't choose that. You didn't think about it. It just happened. Scientists call it the mammalian dive reflex, and it's still sitting inside your nervous system right now, fully loaded, waiting for cold water to touch your face. You've probably felt it 100 times and never once wondered why it's there. But the real answer is far stranger than you're just adjusting to the temperature. Your body still thinks it might have to survive underwater. Not metaphorically, physiologically. And it's been rehearsing for that moment since before you were born. Here's what actually happens. The moment cold water touches the nerves around your nose, cheeks, and forehead, a signal fires straight into your brainstem. Your heart rate drops. Blood vessels in your arms and legs tighten. Blood gets rerouted away from your limbs and pulled toward your heart, lungs, and brain. Your body, in that instant, stops acting like a land animal and starts acting like a diving one. This isn't a party trick. It's one of the most powerful reflexes the human body has. Free divers can drop their heart rate from a resting 70 beats per minute into the 30s or even 20s just by holding their breath and submerging their face. That's a heart rate you'd expect from someone in a coma, achieved on purpose by someone about to swim 60 meters down on a single breath. So the question isn't really, why does this reflex exist? The question is, who was this reflex built for? For most of human history, that question would have sounded strange. Of course humans swim. Of course some people dive. But researchers studying a particular group of sea-dwelling people in Southeast Asia found something that turned, of course, into wait. How is that possible? These communities live almost entirely on the water, in stilted houses and boats, diving for food using nothing but a wooden mask and a spear. Some individuals in these communities can hold their breath for over 5 minutes and dive more than 60 meters down, repeatedly, for most of their working day. No tanks, no fins built for speed, just lungs, training, and something else. When a team of researchers ran ultrasounds on members of these communities, they found something unexpected. Their spleens were significantly larger than average, in some cases by as much as 50%, compared to nearby land-dwelling populations who share similar ancestry. Why does spleen size matter for diving? Because the spleen acts like a biological oxygen tank. It stores oxygen-rich red blood cells. When you dive, and your body triggers that same dive reflex from the cold water pool, your spleen contracts and releases a fresh surge of oxygenated blood into your bloodstream. A bigger spleen means a bigger reserve. A bigger reserve means more time underwater before your body starts screaming for air. Here's the part that reframes everything. The genetic variant linked to this larger spleen size wasn't something these communities developed by practicing hard. It's something they were likely born with, passed down over many generations of people whose survival depended on the sea. Their bodies adapted, at a genetic level, to a life spent partly underwater. You don't have that variant. Statistically, almost none of us do. And yet you still have the dive reflex. You still have a spleen that can contract. You still have a nervous system that responds to cold water on your face by slowing your heart and redirecting your blood. The equipment is the same. The population that fine-tuned it is different, which raises an uncomfortable question. If this reflex is so specialized, so clearly built for underwater survival, why does every human still have a version of it? Why would a landlocked farmer, someone who has never once willingly submerged their face, carry the same wiring as a sea diving community on the other side of the planet? The answer takes you somewhere you weren't expecting. Not the ocean, but the womb. Newborn infants, when briefly submerged in water, show an exaggerated version of this same reflex. Their heart rate drops. Their breathing pauses automatically. Their body redirects blood the same way a free diver's does mid-dive. Physiologists have documented this in infants only weeks old, long before any swimming lessons, long before any conscious control over breath or movement. That's strange if you think about it. A newborn has never dived, has never needed to. So why would this reflex show up strongest at the exact moment a human is least capable of doing anything else? Think about how counterintuitive that is. A newborn can't yet hold up its own head, can't yet focus its eyes on a face more than a few inches away. And yet, submerged briefly in water, its body performs one of the most sophisticated physiological maneuvers a mammal is capable of without a single day of practice. There's no other reflex quite like it, one that appears fully formed before almost anything else about the infant's body has developed. It's less like a skill waiting to be learned and more like a program that was already installed before birth, simply waiting for water to run it. One explanation researchers point to is that this reflex isn't something you learn. It's something you inherit deep in the wiring of your brainstem from a very long lineage of mammals for whom water wasn't optional. Every mammal that dives, from seals to whales to the sea diving communities studied for their spleen size, share a version of the exact same trigeminal to heart circuit that fires when your face gets cold and wet. Humans didn't invent this reflex. We inherited it, mostly intact, from an evolutionary toolkit built long before humans existed at all. So when you jump into a cold pool and feel your heart stutter and slow, you're not experiencing some strange malfunction. You're experiencing a genuinely old survival system, one that some human communities have sharpened into something extraordinary, and one that the rest of us carry around and used, like a tool packed away in the attic of your nervous system. But the story doesn't stop at spleens and cold pools. It gets stranger the closer you look. Free divers who train for years learn to consciously extend this reflex, almost like negotiating with their own nervous system. Physiology labs studying competitive breath-hold divers have recorded the reflex intensifying the longer someone stays submerged. The colder the water and the deeper the dive, the harder the body clamps down on itself. Peripheral blood vessels constrict further. Core temperature gets prioritized over limbs. Even the lungs change shape slightly as blood plasma shifts into the chest cavity to protect against the crushing pressure of deep water. Researchers call this blood shift, and for decades, doctors assumed it would be physically impossible for a human chest to survive it. Then they measured it happening in real divers at real depths and had to rewrite what they thought the human body could withstand. None of this was designed. No one sat down and engineered a mechanism to protect a human rib cage at 60 meters. It simply already existed dormant in the same nervous system you're using right now to read these words. Evolution had already solved a problem most of us would never think to ask about. Here's where it gets personal. You've probably triggered a small version of this reflex more times than you realize. Cold water face immersion is one of the fastest ways to lower a racing heart rate, which is exactly why some emergency physicians now recommend it briefly to help calm the body during moments of panic or anxiety. Splash cold water on your face, hold your breath for a few seconds, and you're not just cooling down. You're pulling a lever built millions of years ago for an entirely different emergency and asking it to help you with a modern one instead. Even the popularity of cold plunges, ice baths, and breathwork practices that have exploded in recent years is, underneath all the branding, a rediscovery of the same reflex. People pay for the experience of triggering something their body has always been able to do for free. They call it resilience training. Biologically, it's closer to borrowing a survival response built for the ocean and using it to feel calmer on dry land. And this is where the deeper reframe comes in. For most of your life, you've probably drawn a hard line between aquatic animals and land animals, with humans firmly on the land side of that fence. But your own nervous system doesn't draw that line nearly so cleanly. Every mammal that returned to the ocean, whales, seals, dolphins, carries a version of this same trigeminal to heart circuit. It didn't have to be reinvented each time. It was already sitting in the shared mammalian blueprint, ready to be dialed up whenever a species needed it. Humans never fully returned to the water the way whales did. But we never fully left the reflex behind either. Some human populations, like the sea diving communities researchers studied for their spleen size, dialed that ancient circuit back up through generations of selection pressure. The rest of us kept a quieter version of the same system, rarely used but never deleted. Think Think about what that means for a moment. Every time you've splashed cold water on your face to wake yourself up, you weren't just shocking yourself alert. You were triggering a reflex that redirects blood toward your brain, the exact mechanism a diver relies on to stay conscious 60 meters underwater. Every time your breath caught in a cold shower, some tiny fragment of that same ancient circuitry fired, whether or not you noticed. You're not built like the sea diving communities whose spleens have adapted over generations to store extra oxygen. But you are built from the same underlying blueprint. A blueprint that predates your ancestors ever standing upright, predates language, predates fire. A blueprint written for a world where going underwater wasn't a hobby. It was survival. And that's the strange part your body never bothered to tell you. You spent your entire life thinking of yourself as a land animal who occasionally goes for a swim. But somewhere in your brainstem, in the half second after cold water hits your face, your body still runs the same emergency protocol as a creature born to dive. Not because you need it, but because evolution rarely deletes what it doesn't have to. So the next time you step into a cold pool and feel that first jolt, that brief slowing in your chest, remember what's actually happening underneath it. You're not adjusting to the cold. You're not panicking. For one quiet half second, your body is doing exactly what it was built to do a very long time ago for a very different kind of person, living a very different kind of life. You're not just cooling off. You're diving.